Chapter 18, Part 2. So here we're going to be looking at the concept of stress. What does that look like in our everyday lives as opposed to major life events? What does that kind of stress look like? We'll look at the variety of stress and then primary and secondary appraisal of stress. Stress defined as a subjective feeling produced by events perceived as uncontrollable and threatening. So I'm sure you're all very aware of stress, especially this time of year, wrapping up the term, trying to get all your stuff done. We're going to define it a little bit in a little bit more detail in terms of the attributes that stress has to have, important to the conversation in this chapter. So events that lead to stress have several common attributes. There's three pieces. One, it has to be extreme, so produce a state of feeling overwhelmed or overloaded. Secondly, produce opposing tendencies in us. So what does that mean? That means that when you know you have to study, you've got an exam coming up, so you kind of do want to study because you want to do well in it, but you really don't. You really don't want to tackle those like 4 chapters of reading, right? Like coming to this class, this term was on a Monday night, right? You'll want to do well in the course, and you want to attend class, but at the same time, you don't really want to, get in the car and drive up to the school. So it's opposing tendencies. And then thirdly, uncontrollable or outside of our power to influence. You kind of got to come to class. You have to study. You have to read the chapters. You did sign up for it, so you do have to do it. So it's a little bit outside of your control. So let's look at the stress response. Now, you've all heard of the fight or flight response. It's also called the general adaptation syndrome, so the GAS. And GAS has 3 stages, right? It's all about our emotional and physiological reactions to stress and the consequence that has on our body. So first you have the alarm stage, which is the flight or fight, right? Now that's the very first thing that's going to do is that is going to create changes in our sympathetic nervous system and our peripheral nervous system as your body gets ready to fight or flight, right? So you've got increased blood pressure, your heart starts beating faster, sweaty palms, your body just gets ready to fight. Stage of resistance, once that is over, right? Your body uses resources at an above average rate, even though the flight or fight response is subsided. So even though the situation has kind of passed, right? Or you're still in it, or it's just sort of passed, you're still depleting your bodily resources, okay? And then finally, once that goes on for a while, you've got exhaustion. So you've depleted all these resources, and now you are left physiologically depleted, and you are susceptible to illness and disease. And we're going to come back to that. So the 2 types of stresses that we're going to look at that has a consequence, which leads to being physiologically vulnerable and mentally vulnerable, are the major life events and daily hassles. So the major life events, Holmes and Ray identified that both positive and negative events can be considered major life stressors. So the death of a loved one can create a lot of stress, and so can a marriage or happy event, right? So it highlights that stress is a subjective response to an event. It can be positive or negative, but it's still going to have the 3 characteristics of intensity, conflict, and uncontrollability. People who experience more stress were more likely to have serious illness. So they start noticing that people who have a lot of stress tend to get sick more. Subsequent experimental research suggests that people under chronic stress deplete bodily resources and become vulnerable to infections because stress lowers the functioning of the immune system. And we will see more research on that. Oh, like here. So, research repeatedly has shown people with more stress points are more likely to have serious illness over the next year. One study that's cited, they took a group of people and they scored them on the stress test, right? And then they took people who scored fairly high, they didn't indicate a level, but high on the stress test, and they divided them into two groups. So group 1 and group 2 both had high scores on the stress test. Then what they did was give group 1 nose drops containing a cold virus. And they gave group 2 saline drops. So they both were putting drops in their nose, and one of the groups had nose drops containing the virus. Result was group 1 was more likely to develop a cold. So basically that's suggesting or demonstrating that their immune systems were lowered. This result has been found repeatedly in research that stress lowers the functioning of the immune system. So daily hassles, what are those? These are the things that we encounter, the stresses that we encounter every single day, right? So just being stuck in traffic, trying to get an essay done, being stuck in a lineup, you have to stop by and pick up some prescriptions and it's taking 20 minutes, half an hour, you gotta get to class, missing your bus, anything like that, right? Your computer, the power dying on your computer and you don't have your cord with you. So many little things, these daily little hassles, they all add up, right? Some other things they looked at, other daily hassles in the study that they think people said reading too many things to do every day, 39%. Losing things, losing your keys, losing your charge cord, losing little things in your life, 38%. Worried about money, property, investment, taxes, 37%. Worried about your physical appearance, what your hair looks like, what your skin looks like, maybe, I don't know, your clothes, anything physical. So 3 most common daily hassles: weight, family member, rising cost of goods. I imagine this one's probably would shoot up to the top if they were to do that this year, as you watch the prices of food and groceries, and going through a drive-through has gone crazy. Next, we look at varieties of stress. So there's 4 different types, and you should know these. Acute stress is the little ones that we deal with every single day, right? The ones that I just said. So this is most stress. And you can get headaches, you can get an upset stomach for minor things. Episodic acute stress. Now this is a little bit more serious. This is when you have acute stress repeated constantly throughout your day or across days, right? You're just always having these little things and it really wears on you. That's going to result more in migraines or hypertension or stroke. The next 2 are somewhat different. So there's traumatic stress, like seeing a car accident or the death of someone. These are major events in your life. So massive instances of acute stress. It's also called PTSD. They talk about paramedics, how they have significantly higher rates of PTSD. People with PTSD, it significantly impairs your ability to function in your daily life. Chronic stress is a very serious form of stress. It's just stress that does not end. It's always there. And it just affects you all day, every day. Okay? So stress has additive effects. It culminates in a person over time. Stress is the subjective reaction to potential stressors. So this is coming back to the fact that things are not inherently stressful for the most part. In order for stress to be evoked, 2 cognitive events must occur. So stress is how we perceive things, okay? So first is if you have to have primary, you have to have secondary. If you don't have one of them, then the stress will not be evoked. Okay. So primary appraisal, you have to perceive the event as a threat to the goals or as demanding in some way. So you have to perceive that the event, like, wow, oh my gosh, this is going to, say this exam is going to, I'm going to fail this exam, it's going to ruin my GPA. This drilling that you hear in the background is going to ruin my video. Right? So you have to perceive it as something that's threatening to you accomplishing your goal. Secondary is there it is, the determination that resources are not adequate to cope with the demands of the threatening event. So for your exam, you have to think, in order for it to be stressful, you have to be thinking, I'm never going to get through this content. I don't have time to read. I just don't seem to be understanding the material. I don't seem to be able to remember all these concepts and understand all these concepts. Say for me in this situation, I have to perceive that I do not have the ability to speak through this drilling and produce a good video. Okay, so if either of these events are missing, then stress is not evoked. So in my current situation with this drilling, yes, I do perceive the drilling as a little bit of a threat to finishing this video, but I need to get this done for you. And so I do have the primary appraisal of seeing it as a threat to getting my goal done. Secondary appraisal, do I feel that I have the resources to cope with this demand? Absolutely, yes. So I am not feeling stressed about it. I'm going to work through it. Coming up to your exam, do you perceive that your exam is going to bomb your grade and that you can't deal with it? That would be stressful. However, if you feel that the exam is coming, it has the potential to bomb your grade, but you do have the resources, you have time, you have a plan for how you're going to study. Therefore, secondary appraisal is not negative, therefore stress is not evoked. Okay? What does the personality research say about stress, primary and secondary appraisal to do with personality traits? People who are high on neuroticism also tend to have significantly high stress appraisal. So they tend to perceive events as very, very stressful. People who are high on extroversion tend to appraise situations as less stressful, and they instead tend to appraise situations as more of a challenge that they need to get through. And then finally, those high in agreeableness, conscientiousness, and openness, they tend to also be associated with lower stress appraisal. And that is the end of part 3. Oh no, sorry, that is the end of part 2. And I will be doing part 3 and part 4 in the next video, so I will see you there.